Um, Hello everyone, I'm happy to present my talk on this really nice and stimulating meeting. I'm working at the European Laboratory for Nonlinear Spectroscopy in Florence, but I began my career with high pressure crystallography. So now if someone asks me a question, if I'm a crystallographer or a spectroscopist, I answer yes. I'm consulted this talk with my former supervisor, Andrzej Katrusiak, who is now the head of the High Pressure Commission of the IUCR, and also with other persons from the Commission. So it's like a talk in the name of the Commission on High Pressure. To formulate a consistent metadata descriptors in high pressure crystallography, we can think of, we have to imagine how the high pressure experiments looks like. The sample during the high pressure experiment is maintained in situ at the elevated pressure environment. So it's in contact with the pressure transmitting medium, and the pressure vessel elements are in the way of the primary diffracted beam, which contaminates the diffraction patterns with diffraction, and also the diffracted and reflected beam is absorbed partially, usually by the diamond windows, which are elements of the diamond anvil cell. We also have to think about the different environments we have. I will talk only about, I will limit myself only to the diamond anvil cell and mostly to the single crystal experiments with the diamond anvil cell, but there are parasite bore cells which are used for neutron diffraction, multi-anvil presses, tube furnaces. The other pressure vessels, and they all wait for their own protocols for data treatment and their own metadata descriptors. We always need to be critical about the high pressure diffraction data because the reflection intensities are very often falsified by the absorption and the effects of the high background. So just to present the basics of high pressure crystallography, the experiments are performed inside a diamond anvil cell. So the crystal is is between the two opposed diamond tips, and there is a gasket between them with a tiny hole. So in fact, you have to pass the backing plate, which could be, as I will show you in the next slide, beryllium backing plate when you when you have to pass through it with radiation, or it can be a conical opening through the diamonds, and the reflection as well is going through the second window. So the pressure is generated, as I told you, between the diamonds. In the sample chamber, it can be a polycrystalline sample or an oriented crystal inside the cell, but usually we use hydrostatic pressure transmitting medium to maintain the constant pressure and to avoid non-hydrostatic effects. The cell restricts access to the reciprocal space. So actually the shape of the accessible part of the reciprocal space is this toroid you have here. So if you look at the diffraction, and it depends on also the shape of and the accessible space depends on the opening angle of the cell. So if you look at the diffraction images, they are limited, so there are like two layers, two selected layers from the oriented crystals inside. Anything which is outside that, if you collect any data outside that, they are not coming from the crystal, just because they are restricted. So it's obvious that you need to know the opening angle and the orientation of the cell to get the correct intensities. Otherwise, you can collect something which is just a background. If you choose a different layer in different orientation, you can see that the layer is the axis is almost full. So it also depends on the orientation of the crystal and the orientation of the cell with respect to the diffractometer and to the goniometer angles. This should be like the first principal metadata item we need. As you can see at the diffraction images, when you use beryllium backing plates, when the radiation passes through the beryllium, in fact, we have lots of diffraction rings from the powdered beryllium. Instead, if you use the backing plates with made of tungsten carbide with opening angle that can allow access to the sample directly through the diamonds, you can just see the reflections from the sample, which are denoted like R, the rings from the gasket, and of course the diamond reflection. The background is usually very high and very varied for high pressure experiments. We cannot avoid it. So once again, there are different design of the diamond anvils and different designs of the backing seats, and it should be also another metadata descriptors. Depending on the different backing seat designs, you have also different absorption profiles for the diamond cell. So if you want to introduce corrections for the intensities of the reflections, you need to know the shape of the backing seat and the design of the anvils, at least the thickness of the diamonds. If you have the crystal inside the cell, which is almost which is just ready-made crystal, let's say. So you put a crystal and a pressure transmitting medium. Usually you center the crystal on a diamond cooler. Instead, if you have the crystal in situ crystallized inside the cell, you have this is an example of crystallization from the melt. So you take liquid, apply pressure, and under high pressure the liquid crystallizes, and this crystal fills completely the cylindrical pressure chamber. So in fact, the shape of the crystal is cylindrical. But if you use like the home source, when you have collimated beam larger than the diameter of the hole in the gasket, which is typically less than 500 microns, the beam is partially shaded by the edges of the metal gasket. So it's not the whole volume of the crystal which is diffracting. You can actually calculate this volume, and you can introduce this correction for the for the reflection intensity. This can be done providing that you know that the hole in the gasket and the sample is oriented, how it's oriented towards the primary and diffracted beam. And you should know also so the shape, if it's cylindrical, if it's perfect cylinder, and if it's perfectly on the axis of the diamond cell. If the crystal fills partially the pressure chamber, You can also calculate it, but you have to know how the crystal faces are oriented inside the pressure chamber. If the beam weight is very small, it's much smaller, like the synchrotron radiation, and it's much smaller than the diameter of the chamber, of course this effect doesn't take place, right? So you don't need to introduce this correction, but it should be also given in the metadata. There are different computer programs, but of course someone can use his or her own program to process the data, which take into account these descriptors, these numbers, but usually they are not reported in the papers. So it's one of the program. It's Crystallis Pro. There are some details maybe that are not very clear from here, but you can take a picture of the crystal inside the diamond anvil cell, and you can define the diameter of the cullet, the diameter of the chamber, if there is an offset from the center, and the shape of the crystal. Actually, this picture is could be very helpful, because if the crystal absorbs highly itself, you can also introduce corrections for the absorption of the crystal. So this is the screenshot from the program by Rigaku, and they actually introduce the routine by Rosengel, who wrote a program Absorb for absorption corrections regarding all these descriptors. So all the sizes and all and the orientation of all the elements of the pressure vessel with respect to the goniometry. Pressure transmitting medium is also very important in high pressure experiments. This is an example from my recent work. It's not only because you can have different hydrostaticity limits when and the sample steps to be hydrostatic above some point, but also you can change the chemical composition. This is a molecular crystal of arsenic oxide. It's a cage-like molecule, an organic crystal, and in fact we discovered that helium, which was used as pressure transmitting medium, penetrates in the interstitial positions within the crystal, but only on the outer shell of the crystal. So we can see weak spots on the raw data, and it's easily to miss if you miss the information about the pressure transmitting medium. Right, so someone can, if I, for example, I miss this information, someone can reinterpret this data, but only providing that he or she knows what kind of pressure transmitting medium I used. So, just to sum up on the metadata descriptors, most essential ones in high pressure crystallography are, of course, orientation of the diamond anvil cell, if we use the diamond anvil cell, with respect to the incident beam and the detector, which is usually along the axis of the beam is along the primary beam in the zero diffractometer position. But if you use another setups, someone can have fantasy, let's say, and have different position of the cell in the linear goniometer position, right? The sample shape, the sample form. The sample preparation and the history of the sample was a crystal which was mounted inside the cell, or the sample was in situ recrystallized inside the diamond cell, from the solution and from the melt. And what kind of solution was used? What were the conditions of the recrystallization? Where we used temperature to obtain single crystal, to obtain single grain, and let it grow, or it was just by changing pressure, because you can, depending on these conditions, you can get different polymorphs. Then, of course, dimensions of all the diamond anvil cell components. So the thickness of the diamond anvils, the thickness of the gasket, the diameter of the experimental chamber, the type of backing plates which we use. Are we passing with radiation through the backing plates, or they are just the conical openings? So we are just passing through the diamonds. The opening angle of the conical aperture. Possibly the chemical composition of the cell parts, like the anvils, which can be diamond, but we can use other materials for the anvils. The gasket, which leaves you the diffraction rings on the road on the diffraction images, so we can identify in which place you should expect the diffraction from the gasket. The backing plate types, and possibly the absorption coefficients. Pressure transmitting medium, as I was saying, and the sample photo is sometimes necessary. Of course, this brief description concerned only diamond anvil cell. As I told you, there are different types of pressure vessels, and we have to consider also them. For neutron diffractions, there are completely different types of pressure cells, and we can talk about powder diffraction, about energy dispersive data. They all wait for the descriptions. Now I'd like to tell you about some metadata, high pressure metadata descriptors which I found already in the CIF files, so in the CIF dictionaries. So, in the core CIF, we have the descriptor on the specimen support, which can be the type of the pressure cell. We can describe in the ambient environment the pressure transmitting medium. The ambient pressure is actually given as the descriptor in kilopascals. It can be also the range of the pressure. Then we have the unit cell measurement pressure, and the crystal pressure history, which is sometimes relevant if the crystal was recrystallized, was actually obtained in situ inside the cell. Then there is a whole passage on the recrystallization method. So we should be as much detailed as we can about the whole procedure of obtaining the crystal. If the crystal was not crystallized before it and was formed in situ under pressure. Then there are some data in macromolecular CIF. You can notice that there is descriptor experimental crystal grow pressure, which could be a real nice descriptor also in the core CIF, because not only protein or macromolecular crystals can be grown inside the cell. We have descriptors for the cell measurement, ambient pressure, also in standard uncertainties. Then there is preparation pressure of the sample in powder diffraction CIF dictionary. It's true that it's mostly used for materials metastable, which were recovered which were synthesized under pressure and then recovered and measured it ex situ. But it can also pertain to single crystal samples. So it can be similar descriptors can be put also in the core CIF. There is a specific one about the modulated structures, but all those descriptors I was talking about here are actually missing in CIF. So we can, the proposition from the commission members is we can do both. We can actually supply some more descriptors to the CIF dictionaries, and the metadata we can store along with the raw data. Like, for example, not only the textual or numerical descriptors, but also the picture of the the crystal. I was thinking also about what Susanna said in her talk about the picture of the crystal. It's not only for the color of the crystal and the shape of the crystal, but if you have a crystal, absorbing crystal, some programs allow you to take the picture of the crystal and to draw the shape of the crystal, and then you can have absorption correction directly from the shape of the crystal, right? So it's usually done at the stage of data reduction, but then the data, this metadata item is usually lost. So, as I said, there are some descriptors that can be added to CIF dictionaries, and so I would like to stop. Thanks to the money givers, and thank you very much for your attention. I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Camille. It's obvious that you're making good headway within the Commission spelling out what you need, so that's very good. Questions to Camille? Why is it that it's only in the CIF that the pressure seems to be recorded with its standard uncertainty?
It's not a question to me.
What?
It's not a question to me, right?
Yes, it is. I'm giving you.
Somebody goofed, I think, is the answer, John.
There are some historical reasons. My opinion is that it was Solbrunner who actually proposed this descriptor, but I don't know.
But you need the uncertainty in the pressure value for all of your experiments. But it was not on. But it was not on your list. So it's not there at the minute.
It's not, sir.
No, there's just a technical point of correction there, John. That the issue by default of the format in core CIF can always be expressed as an addendum to the value, but for the CIF, it needs to be itemized as a separate item.
Very good.
May I just make a comment that a couple of times this point has come up this morning. So in your very nice presentation, you gave a good set of examples why it would be useful to record photographs of the crystal in the cell. And the question arose earlier: should CSD store actual images of the crystal to characterize it better? I think it's a very nice idea, and it just occurs to me that the image CIF format, although its primary application is to diffraction images, I think it was developed in a very agnostic sense. There's no reason why you cannot capture any type of image using the formalism within the image CIF. You just need a few more additional metadata descriptors to say what this particular image represents.
Okay, well, thank you very much once again, Camille. So we break for lunch now, and nominally 1:40, but shall I suggest